Hallo meine Damen und Herren und willkommen zurück. Das ist die 9. Lektion in unserer Reise. As usual, I have a lot in store for you today, including how to tell time and how to use possessive pronouns like my, your, and their. Alles klar? Gut. So, let's dive right in and kick things off. We're going to start with die Uhrzeit. There are 3 common ways to inquire about die Uhrzeit in German. There's wie viel Uhr ist es? Literally, how much hour is it? Then there's wie spät ist es? Which literally means how late is it? And then there's a third phrase which is somewhat more formal. Welche Uhrzeit haben wir? Literally, this means which hour time do we have? Nun, before we learn how to respond to these questions, we need to clarify something about the word time in German. In English, we use only the one word time, but in German, speakers actually use 3 distinct words. There's die Zeit, which means time in general, as in, es gibt keine Zeit. Haben wir Zeit? Or even the emphatic, let's go for it declaration, jetzt ist die Zeit. The other 2 words for time in German are die Uhrzeit and das Mal. Like the general word for time, die Zeit, the nouns die Uhrzeit and das Mal both translate as time in English, but we don't use them interchangeably with die Zeit. For example, we can ask, welche Uhrzeit haben wir? But we can't say, welche Zeit haben wir? And we can say, es gibt keine Zeit, but we can't say, es gibt keine Uhrzeit. The same goes for the noun das Mal. In English, we can say, it's my first time in Germany. In German, though, we wouldn't use Zeit or Uhrzeit to express this concept. Instead, we would say, ich bin zum ersten Mal in Deutschland. Alles klar? As for the noun die Uhr, it can mean either hour or clock. For example, there's die Wanduhr, die Armbanduhr, and of course, die Kuckucksuhr. And by the way, I've always really wanted an authentic Kuckucksuhr. But alas, sie sind sehr teuer. Gut. And now let's get back to die Uhrzeit. We're going to take a look at a few Wanduhren to learn the basics of telling time. Alles klar? Also dann. Each Wanduhr shows the time in a different time zone around the globe. Our first question is, wie viel Uhr ist es in London? And the answer? Es ist 21:46 Uhr. First, notice that the speakers often use the 24-hour system to avoid possible confusion. In more colloquial speech, they use the 12-hour system, but they throw in adverbs of time for clarity. We'll see this in a moment. Now to our next clock. Meine Damen und Herren, wie spät ist es in New York? The answer? Es ist 16:46 Uhr. Let's take a look at one more question so we can recognize the pattern here. Welche Uhrzeit haben Sie in Tokyo? Now, remember that Tokyo is over 12 hours ahead of New York. So if it's in the evening in New York, it'll be morning in Tokyo. So our answer here is, es ist 6:46 Uhr in Tokyo. Ausgezeichnet. Und das ist alles. This is the most basic way for telling time in German. We state the hour first, using the 24-hour system if there's any ambiguity as to AM or PM. Then we put in the word Uhr, and then we give the minutes. Es ist 6:46 Uhr in Tokyo. While we're on the topic of the word die Uhr in telling time, there's another word for hour that learners of German tend to confuse with die Uhr, and that is die Stunde. Both die Uhr and die Stunde mean hour, but like the words for time that we went over a few moments ago, the nouns die Uhr and die Stunde refer to different meanings of hour in English. Die Uhr is used to express a time of day, as in es ist 11 Uhr, es ist 14 Uhr, or wie viel Uhr ist es? The noun die Stunde, however, means hour in the sense of 60 Minuten. For instance, in response to the question, wie lange ist das Konzert? We could answer, eine Stunde or 2 Stunden. Or, if it's Wagner's 4-part Ring of the Nibelung, we'd say, die Oper ist 15 Stunden lang. Or consider this little algebra question. Wie viele Stunden hat eine Woche? The answer? Eine Woche hat 168 Stunden. At least 3 or 4 times a semester, that is, 3 oder 4 Mal im Semester, I'll read something like this on a student's exam. Ich schlafe nur 4 Uhren am Wochenende. Now, what the student wants to say is actually, I only sleep 4 hours on the weekend. But what they should write then is, ich schlafe nur 4 Stunden am Wochenende. Not to mention that they should also get more than 4 Stunden of sleep. Aber gut, so ist das Studentenleben. Also dann, let's keep going with die Uhrzeit. We have a few more Wanduhren to check out. These will also show us a few more ways to express time. For example, take this clock. Here we would say, es ist 1 Uhr, or we would just say, es ist 1. Or, if it's 1 in the afternoon, we'd say, es ist 13 Uhr, or es ist 13. Like in English, if the time is right on the hour, we don't always have to put the hour part there. Now, take a look at these clocks. Earlier we learned that we can express all these times by saying the hour first, then the word Uhr followed by the minutes. For instance, es ist 1 Uhr 10, es ist 1 Uhr 50, es ist 1 Uhr 15, es ist 1 Uhr 45, and es ist 1 Uhr 30. But another way of expressing these times is to use the adverbs nach, vor, and halb, and the noun Viertel. And so, for the times here that we just saw, we could say, es ist 10 nach 1. Literally, it's 10 after 1. Es ist Viertel nach 1. It's a quarter after 1. Es ist halb 2. Literally, it's half 2. Notice that in German, we always refer to the next hour when we use halb. So think of halb as in halfway until or half of the next hour. So halb 10 is 9:30. Halb 6 is 5:30, and so on. All right, let's keep going with our clocks. After halb 2, we have es ist Viertel vor 2. Literally, it's a quarter before 2. And finally, we have es ist 10 vor 2. It's 10 before 2. Alles klar, meine Damen und Herren? These are the most common phrases for telling time auf Deutsch. Also dann, let's take a moment to practice our new time-telling skills. For this next exercise, we need to learn 2 more useful phrases for traveling to or within a German-speaking country. And the first phrase is, wann fährt der Zug nach? And the second phrase is, wann kommt der Zug in an? We're going to use these questions and answer them using a mock-up of a Fahrplan for die Deutsche Bahn, the German railways. So, this is a Fahrplan for a one-way ticket, eine einfache Fahrkarte, from the main train station in Munich, von München Hauptbahnhof, to the main station in Frankfurt am Main, nach Frankfurt am Main Hauptbahnhof. One more time. Eine einfache Fahrkarte von München Hauptbahnhof nach Frankfurt am Main Hauptbahnhof. Now imagine that we're standing in the München Hauptbahnhof and someone asks us, wann fährt der Zug nach Frankfurt? We would answer, 5:10. By the way, you'll notice that there are quite a few important words on this Fahrplan. Let's take a moment and go over some of these. In the column furthest left, we find the terms der Bahnhof and die Haltestelle, followed by a column to the right showing the time, that is, die Zeit, of each train's departure and arrival. The little word ab means departs at, and the little word an means arrives at. In the next column to the right, we see Gleis. This is the track that the train will arrive on. Next, we see Produkte, literally products. But actually, it refers to what kind of train we'll be riding in. Here we see that's going to be an ICE, that is, an Intercity Express. ICE trains are the fastest and most comfortable trains to travel with. Other trains you might see listed in the Produkte column are IC, Intercity, or RB, Regionalbahn. The last column, Weitere Informationen, tells us the train's final destination and any additional info about it. For instance, here we see that the ICE 800 train ends in Hamburg-Altona and that the train has a Bordrestaurant. Also dann, let's get back to our travel times. Here's our next question. Wann kommt der Zug in Frankfurt Main Hauptbahnhof an? The answer? 13:46 Uhr. This means that our einfache Fahrkarte von München Hauptbahnhof nach Frankfurt am Main Hauptbahnhof is going to take 3 Stunden und 51 Minuten. That's pretty fast, considering that's at about 400 Kilometer von München nach Frankfurt am Main. Now, there's one more important piece of info on our Fahrkarte that we need to point out. Namely, this is not a non-stop trip. In fact, we'll be taking 2 trains, and we see this listed in the Produkte column. ICE 800 und ICE 228. Our first trip is von München Hauptbahnhof nach Nürnberg Hauptbahnhof. There, in Nürnberg, we have to change trains. So on our ticket, we find the word Umsteigezeit. The word umsteigen actually means change of trains or transfer. So the noun, die Umsteigezeit, is actually the time for changing trains. As we can see, wir haben 30 Minuten. Or we could say, wir haben eine halbe Stunde. So then, if someone on the train to Nürnberg asked us, wann kommt der Zug in Nürnberg an? We would answer, 11 Uhr. And how would we answer this question? Wann fährt der Zug von Nürnberg nach Frankfurt am Main Hauptbahnhof? Richtig. We would say, 11:30. And finally, how would we reply to this question? Wann kommt der Zug in Frankfurt an? Well, we would say, 13:46 Uhr. Also dann. Now that we've sharpened our new time-telling skills in German, let's go a step further and start formulating complete sentences. And to help us do this, we're going to imagine the following absolutely plausible scenario. That you and I have planned an entire day of activities with our new BFF, David Hasselhoff. Herr Hasselhoff is actually a fun guy to spend the day with. Schwimmt, singt und spricht gern Deutsch. And because you and I are always gut organisiert, we have written down the following Tagesprogramm for our day out with Herr Hasselhoff. Now, when Herr Hasselhoff asks us, wann essen wir Frühstück? We can respond with, wir essen Frühstück 7:45. Herr Hasselhoff's second question would be, wann machen wir die Waldwanderung? To which we would answer, wir machen die Waldwanderung 9:30. And Herr Hasselhoff's third question would probably be, wann schauen wir den Film Das Boot? Now, notice that for this last activity, we've specified a window of time, that is, from and until so-and-so time. And yes, it really does take 4 Stunden to watch the uncut version of Das Boot, but it's worth it. So, to express this concept of from, until, in German, we would say von bis. For instance, ich schlafe von 6 bis 8 Uhr. And so, in response to Herr Hasselhoff's question, wann schauen wir den Film Das Boot? We would say, wir schauen den Film von 18 bis 22 Uhr. Alles klar? Just make a special note of these three prepositions: von, and bis. We'll see them again in later lessons. Also dann, soweit alles gut? Großartig. Because there's actually another word order that we can use in German when we're responding to wann questions like wann essen wir Frühstück and wann machen wir eine Waldwanderung. To see what I mean, let's go back just one more time to our planned activities with Herr Hasselhoff. All of these sentences begin with a subject and verb, followed by the direct object and finally the time. And now, here's where things get fun. When native speakers say sentences like these, with information about the time that the action occurs, they tend to place this information at the start of the sentence. Take a look. When we put something other than the subject at the head of the sentence, such as the time, our conjugated verb comes next, followed by the subject, and then whatever else we want to add, which here are the direct objects Frühstück, die Waldwanderung, and den Film. And there we have it. 3 nicely formed and grammatically correct responses for Herr Hasselhoff. 7:15 essen wir Frühstück. 9:30 machen wir eine Waldwanderung. Und von 18 bis 22 Uhr sehen wir den Film Das Boot. The technical term for this, for when we place an important piece of information at the start of a sentence, is subject-verb inversion. It's common with expressions of time like jetzt, dann, heute, heute in der Früh, heute Morgen, heute Nachmittag, heute Abend, and heute Nacht. What this means is that the next time Herr Hasselhoff rings us up and says, "Und, was machen wir heute?" we can tell him, "Heute machen wir viel. 7:15 essen wir Frühstück. Dann machen wir eine Waldwanderung. Und heute Abend sehen wir den Film Das Boot." Alles klar? Nun, meine Damen und Herren, I realize that was a lot of material on how to tell time and how to embed time elements into complete sentences. But I'm sure you'll agree with me when I say, wir machen gute Fortschritte. So, let's now turn our attention to the final topic of our lesson, Possessivpronomen. And instead of David Hasselhoff, I've asked Ralf und Mia Gruber, our native speaker friends from Augsburg, to help us out with a very special activity. Namely, I've asked them to reenact their first date. And in fact, this first date took place in a cozy locale in Augsburg called Bauerntanz. Ralph has told me that this restaurant, Bauerntanz, has been in Augsburg since, are you ready? 1572. And Mia, she told me that this date was actually their first chance to get to know each other. Among other things, they talked about their families. So let's take a look now at how their conversation on this first date played out. And let's pay special attention to the words that express the concept of ownership or belonging. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, los geht's in Bauerntanz, where love is in the air.
Hast du eine große Familie?
Naja, meine Familie ist mittelgroß. Ich habe 2 Geschwister, einen Bruder und eine Schwester.
Wie sind ihre Namen?
Mein Bruder heißt Jakob, er ist 20 Jahre alt und studiert Maschinenbau.
Und was sind seine Hobbys?
Er hat sein Auto gern, das ist sozusagen sein Hobby. Abends repariert er sein Auto.
Wo wohnt er?
Zu Hause.
Mensch, ist euer Haus groß?
Nein, unser Haus ist nicht sehr groß, aber wir wohnen gerne dort.
Und wie heißt deine Schwester?
Sie heißt Stefanie und ist 14 Jahre alt.
Und was macht sie gern?
Naja, ihr Hobby ist ein bisschen bizarr.
Was meinst du mit bizarr?
Sie sammelt gern Insekten.
Wie bitte?
Ihre Lieblingsinsekten sind Schmetterlinge, Ameisen und besonders Spinnen.
Ach so.
Ach, ist das nicht romantisch? Vielen Dank, Ralf und Mia. Now, let's take a closer look at the words that Ralph and Mia used to express relationships of possession with regard to their family members. One example is when Mia tells Ralph, "Meine Familie ist mittelgroß," and "Mein Bruder heißt Jakob." The possessive pronouns meine and mein are readily understandable to speakers of English. But as we can see, the German word for my has endings. Meine for feminine nouns like Familie, and mein for masculine and neuter nouns like Bruder and Haus. These are also in the nominative case, by the way, but remember that we've learned the accusative case as well. Thus, the full declension table for the possessive pronoun mein looks like this. For singular nouns in the nominative, we have mein for masculine, meine for feminine, and mein for neuter. And for plural subject nouns, we have meine. In the accusative case, the possessive pronoun is different only for singular masculine nouns, where it becomes meinen. The rest of the paradigm is the same as the nominative. Singular feminine is meine, singular neuter is mein, and for plural nouns, it's meine. Oh, by the way, if these endings look familiar, it's because we've already learned them for the indefinite article ein and the negation word kein. In fact, as we'll see in just a moment, all possessive pronouns in German take these same endings. Which brings us back to Ralph and Mia's first date. After Mia tells Ralph, "Ich habe zwei Geschwister, einen Bruder und eine Schwester," Ralph asks this question: "Wie sind ihre Namen?" Here, the possessive pronoun ihre refers to two nouns, to Mia's brother and to Mia's sister. So what Ralph is asking here is what their names are. And Mia then tells him, "Mein Bruder heißt Jakob. Ist 20 Jahre alt und studiert Maschinenbau." He's 21 years old and he's studying mechanical engineering. Ralph then asks a follow-up question about Mia's brother. And remember, it's their first date, so he's genuinely curious about her family. So he asks, "Und was sind seine Hobbys?" Now, the possessive pronoun here is seine. It's referring to a masculine noun, der Bruder. And seine has a plural nominative ending. Ralph wants to know what the brother's hobbies are, that is, his hobbies. Seine Hobbys. So then, so far we've seen the possessive pronouns mein, sein, and ihr. And there are still a few more that come up in Ralph and Mia's dinner date dialogue. For instance, after Mia tells Ralph that she and her two siblings still live at home, Ralph asks her, "Ist euer Haus groß?" Now the possessive pronoun euer refers to a house that belongs to more than one person. In other words, your guy's house. Euer Haus. And Mia replies to this question with the fitting pronoun to express that. No, our house isn't big, but we like living there. Nein, unser Haus ist nicht groß, aber wir wohnen gern dort. So just like the possessive pronoun euer, the possessive pronoun unser also expresses plural ownership, but from a different perspective. Here, Mia is speaking for herself and her family in terms of we and our. And Ralph and Mia still aren't done with their use of possessive pronouns. Recall that Mia tells Ralph, "Ich habe zwei Geschwister, einen Bruder und eine Schwester." And after Ralph asks about her brother, he then asks about the sister. "Und wie heißt deine Schwester?" In this question, the word deine is referring to the addressee's sister. The addressee here is Mia, obviously, and she and Ralph are addressing each other with the informal du personal pronoun. So when Ralph says, "Wie heißt deine Schwester?" he's asking, "What's your sister's name?" Finally, there's one more possessive pronoun that comes up in Ralph and Mia's conversation. After Mia says about her sister, "Sie heißt Stephanie und sie ist 14 Jahre alt," Ralph asks what her sister enjoys doing. "Und was macht sie gern?" To which Mia somewhat hesitantly replies, "Na ja, ihr Hobby ist ein bisschen bizarre." Her hobby is a little bizarre. Alles klar? Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, we're now ready to take stock of all the possessive pronouns in German with this handy table. The singular possessive pronouns are mein, dein, ihr, sein, ihr, and sein. And the plural possessive pronouns are unser, euer, ihr, and ihr. Notice that in formal address, the singular and plural possessive pronouns are the same. Ihr with the capital I. Another thing we should take special note of is that 4 of these possessive pronouns are completely homophonous. The 2 capitalized ihr pronouns we just talked about, third person singular feminine ihr, no capital I, and third person plural ihr, also no capital I. Occasionally, a student will ask me, Herr Frem, how do we tell these 4 possessive pronouns apart? I mean, how do we know if the person we're talking to is asking about their friend, her friend, or your guy's friend? And in typical professorial fashion, I respond to this question with a question of my own. How do we, as speakers of English, disambiguate the homophones there, and there, or two, and two? The answer? We do it through context. And the same goes for German. Ihr, and ihr. The context will make the distinction between these clear. For example, there are 2 instances of the homophones ihr in Mia and Ralph's conversation. When Mia tells Ralph, ich habe 2 Geschwister, einen Bruder und eine Schwester. Ralph follows this up with the question, wie sind ihre Namen? Now, the context here indicates that this ihr refers to more than one person, namely, der Bruder und die Schwester. And that these persons do not include the speaker or the addressee. That is, the possessive pronoun is from the third person perspective. Mia's sentence, therefore, provides the context for us to interpret ihre Namen as their names. Now, at another point in their conversation, Mia tells Ralph about her sister. Sie sammelt gern Insekten. Which kind of catches Ralph off guard, because, well, there just aren't a lot of young people out there nowadays who like to collect insects. So Ralph's response is, wie bitte? Which prompts Mia to explain. Ihre Lieblingsinsekten sind Schmetterlinge, Ameisen und besonders Spinnen. Now, first of all, don't be thrown off by the capital I in this ihre. It's capitalized only because it's at the start of the sentence. The crucial context here comes from Mia's use of the third person singular feminine pronoun sie, which refers to Stephanie, her younger sister. And having received this important contextual clue, Ralph knows who Mia is talking about when she says, ihre Lieblingsinsekten sind Schmetterlinge, Ameisen und besonders Spinnen. Alles klar? Again, my point is this. In most cases, the context of a conversation will tell us how we should interpret the homophones ihr, and ihr. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, die 9. Lektion kommt zu Ende. As usual, we covered a lot of ground. And in our next lesson, we're going to be taking yet another important step forward in our journey. We are going to learn how to connect individual sentences to express more complex utterances, using these tiny yet tremendous grammatical words called, are you ready? Coordinating conjunctions. Auf Wiedersehen und bis gleich.